Behind the Scene with David Bedein at the end of August 2023, also at the end of Elul 2023, and actually 5783, we're going into a new year, new Jewish year, and both the Jewish and secular years there's a kind of tradition to make some, shall we say, commitments and plans and dreams of what you'd like to accomplish in the new year. So as an investigative journalist, I'd like to say what are the issues that you'll see it posted on the site very shortly. What are the issues that I hope to investigate in the new year? And they're very, very heavy issues, and many of which are strange to a lot of people who are not aware of what's going on here. The first issue is which foreign governments are now funding the current insurrection in Israel. It's not a spontaneous demonstrations. It's well orchestrated. We have a theory, a feeling, an instinct that the American government is behind it, but this has to be looked into. So with the help of contributions, donations that people can make, we hope to hire a professional crew to look into this and get to the bottom of who is really pulling the strings for these, what has amounted to an insurrection. The second issue is at a time when the Palestinian Authority is thought of as a panacea, as the solution for all the problems Israel has with terrorist activity. What current terrorist activity is coming out of the PA, of the Palestinian Authority? Now, this is very important because Israel and the U.S. and the Western countries were hoping that the PLO would go away and the PA would come in its place and would provide a reasonable alternative. But when the PLO, officially a terrorist organization, being replaced by an administrative outfit where the people who run it wear ties and are business-like, that was thought of as the solution. However, our agency, the Israel Resource News Agency, working with the Center for Near East Policy Research, we conducted 10 years of investigations into who the PA is and how it's still being run by terrorists. Again, there is information about terrorist activity coming out of the PA, but it's being held back from the public, or at least downplayed. That has to be thoroughly looked into. In a situation where a private medical organization wrote that there were 1,800 attacks that took place in the first 6 months of the year, terrorist attacks, and a major newspaper wrote accumulated the information that 35 people had been murdered in these attacks. This is not something that is in the front of the headlines, not something in front of people's consciousness, not well known. Now, the third issue, which we hope to look into in the new year, is a follow-up of what happened to all the weapons that Israel supplied to the Palestinian Authority. Now, 30 years ago, when the Israel signed the peace deal with the PLO, most people did not realize, even though it was signed in a public domain in the White House, a desk in front of the White House, the same desk that was used to sign on the Camp David Accord in 1979, even though it was public and people seemed to have the perception that it was a peace accord that was achieved, how many people understand that the PA never even ratified the accord? The Fatah, which is the main element of the PLO, met in a special session on October 6th, 1993, and journalists that we know, Pinchas Inbari, working for a newspaper actually somewhat left. The newspaper was called Al HaMishmar. He went to to Tunis, which is where the PLO had its headquarters, and he was there to witness the Fatah giving the approval, ratifying the accord, the Oslo, what was called the Oslo Accord, the peace agreement with the PLO. Except that he called in and said there was no approval, they didn't even meet, and they didn't have a quorum, and that was it. That's something that has to be looked into further. Now, that's the whole issue of Israel still supplying the weapons to the PA in the first 2 or 3 years of the Oslo process, all the weapons coming from Israel for the PA. Now this has become a very important issue, the fact that there's been so many terrorist attacks taking place with light weapons run by the Palestinian Authority's security forces, known as the PSF, the Palestine Security Force. This means that 1 and 1 is 2. Israel supplied weapons, and now they're being used against Jews. Now, again, most people don't put that together because it's not even mentioned in the media where the weapons are coming from. There are many sources that are connected with the government say, oh, it's coming from Iran. But I go back to my notes from 30 years ago, when the PA was established, Palestinian Authority was established. I was working as in the same agency, but preparing briefing papers for the foreign media. And some of the briefing papers dealt with the controversy as to whether or not Israel will or will not give weapons to the PA. And it happened. Some of the momentum for not giving weapons to the PA was squelched after the attack in Hebron, where a Jewish resident of the Kiryat Arba murdered 29 worshippers at the Cave of the Patriarchs. And that's when some of the movement stopped. Some of the momentum behind the movement stopped. But again, this has to be looked into so that people will know who is giving these weapons. Now, the other issue which is connected. At the time, in September 2015, the Palestinian Authority created a law which provides a salary for life for anyone who murders a Jew. Now, that law is still extant. Neither Israel nor any donor of the PA have asked that law be canceled, be repealed. Now, why is there such a hesitancy in Israel and the donor nations to cancel that covenant, not the covenant, which also wasn't canceled, but to cancel that law which is the first law in history that provides a salary for someone who murders a Jew. Now, connected to all this is the question of 6.4 million descendants of the Arab refugees who remained in temporary refugee camps run by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency since 1952. And there's no one saying to stop it, to give them an alternative. The people living in the refugee camps an alternative place to live, and the refugee situation looks like being refugees for perpetuity, as opposed to trying to solve the issue. What's pushed the creation of the Israel peace movement? The first issue was the issue of helping the people in the refugee camps get out of the camps in the normal circumstances. That's not happening. Now, the next issue has to do with education. What lethal texts and maps are taught in the PA classroom, the Palestinian Authority classroom. It's kind of known, but not well known. It's glossed over, and it hasn't really, the dime hasn't really dropped for most people on the truth that a war curriculum has been established, and in the new school year, which began this week, a renewed school book featuring Dalal al-Mughrabi, who murdered 36 Jews on a bus in 1978. She's the hero, and she's the one she's teaching children to emulate her. That's what's being taught in the Palestinian Ministry of Education. Okay, and last but not least, we're going to research an aspect of Jewish law. Is it permissible to do business with an enemy that pays people to murder Jews? Again, if you sit make a business deal with the Palestinian Authority, someone who lives under the premises of the PA, and you want to do business with the guy, you want to make profits, etc. But at the same time, you know that if he makes profits, he'll use it. He'll often give it to agencies that use it as an incentive to murder Jews. So the question is this permitted by Jewish law? Jewish law it basically works parallel to Western law. Sometimes there's contradictions. Sometimes they go according to their whims. We're not sure. But what we want to know is if it's permissible to do business with an entity that pays people to murder Jews. And I hope to be able to, with a team of professionals, be able to present the issue very well, and then to share with Jews in Israel. This is David Bedein, Behind the Scene with David Bedein. Thank you.
The Askar refugee camp, located on the outskirts of Nablus, is one of 19 Palestinian refugee camps in Judea and Samaria, controlled and maintained by UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which benefits from a whopping budget of $1.6 billion, flowing from 67 donor countries and 33 international NGOs. 58% of that budget funds the UNRWA school system, which emphasizes and promotes the right of return as the underlying principle for its operations, its very reason for being.
احنا تهجرنا من يافا واليوم جايين نحكي عن حقنا بالعودة وبنكافئ لحد ما نرجع لأراضينا في يافا وأراضينا بحيفا والليل والرملة إنه راح نرجع قريبا جدا لو شو ما يصير مش راح يصير سلام السلام بدناش إياه.
شو بيعلموكم عن حق العودة بالمدارس؟
ما احنا مشروع شهادة كلنا واحنا لازم ندافع عن وطننا كتير راح ناخذ حقنا والله ينتقم منهم ان شاء الله يموتوا كلهم. القدس عاصمة فلسطين وراح تضلها لنا ومش راح تتغير راح تضلها لنا. المستوطنين اللي فيها كلهم راح ينتخوا.
يا توتة الدار صبرك عالزمان انجار لابد ما نعود مهما طول المشوار يابا 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 يابا.
وحابة أقول لكم إنه مفتاح العودة لساته معنا وراح نفتح يوم من الأيام في بيوتنا.
مثل إني بتعلم بجهدي وحق إني آخذ وطني ونحرر فلسطين، يعني الناس الشهداء يعني بيقدروا يحرروا فلسطين إذا بنضلهم هيك.
أنا نور المسيمة مديرة نادي أشبال العاصفة. إحنا كل سنة اللجنة الوطنية بتعمل نوادي صيفية في مخيم عسكر. قسمنا الأطفال ل4 مجموعات حتى بأسماء شهدائنا في مخيم عسكر، أساسهم يضلوا حاضرين في ذهنهم وفي أفكارهم ويتعلموا منهم البطولة ويضلهم مستمرين في درب المقاومة. وفي عندهم يعني كل طفل مستعد يكون مشروع شهيد مقابل إنه يحافظ على المبادئ اللي إحنا مترسخة عنا، حقنا في العودة، وإن شاء الله انتفاضة أقوى جاية، وهدول أطفالنا هم اللي راح يقودوها.
The delusion of refugees going back to homes they left in the wake of the 1948 war, homes which are long gone, has turned into the source, the motivation, and the promoter of the armed rebellion against the Jews. Askar is the smallest of the refugee camps in Judea and Samaria, yet stands out as the camp with the highest amount of Palestinians engaged in terror activity in relation to the number of its inhabitants, including the highest number of shaheeds, armed terrorists killed in the act of murder, and the largest number of convicts serving life imprisonment for murder.
مخيم مقاتل، مخيم مقاوم، مخيم يقدم الشهيد تلو الشهيد ومن جميع الأطياف ومن جميع الأعمار ومن جميع التوجهات.
From this refugee camp embarked the Palestinian assassin of brothers Hillel and Yagel Yaniv from Har Bracha, who were killed driving through Hawara in February 2023. It was also home to a 15-year-old terrorist who set out this past April from Askar, armed with a gun, shooting and severely injuring 2 Jews in Jerusalem. Askar is also home to the 3-man terrorist squad who, on April 7th, 2023, murdered Lucy D. and her 2 daughters, 15-year-old Reina and 20-year-old Maya, in a drive-by shooting. The perpetrators of these heinous killings are hailed today as heroes in the Askar refugee camp. As soon as the murder of this Jewish woman and her 2 young daughters became known, sweets were handed out on the streets of Askar as an expression of happiness and triumph. The funeral of Hassan Katanani, the terrorist who pulled the gun on the D family, grew into a huge rally of support, which consisted of everyone from the Askar refugee camp as they celebrated the murder of Jews and the destruction of Israel.
مين بطل المخيم
حسن القطراني.
ليه؟
سوى عملية لأنه أول شيء دافع عن وطنه وعن كرامته، رجع شوية من الكرامة لما هجرونا من ديورنا وبيوتنا وسيطروا على أراضينا.
مين هدول؟
إبراهيم النابلسي ووديع الحواح
وعبد الله الحصري، أحمد السعدي.
مين هدول؟ ايه؟
كل مخيم أبطال، في صالح صبرا وفي معاذ المصري وفي حسن القطناني وفي كتير شهداء عسكر. ونعطي لأخوتنا المقاومين نهديهم سلام والله يحمي كل واحد مقاوم. تحية لكتيبة عسكر وكتيبة جنين وكتيبة بلاطة. هذا عمي الله يرحمه استشهد 2022 28/10/2022.
وين استشهد وكيف استشهد؟
عملية على حشيش حوارة.
Posters with pictures of the killers were plastered in every corner of Oscar, while songs of praise for the murderers were composed in their honor. Oscar's UNRWA summer camps were even named for these murderers.
صورة البطل إبراهيم النابلسي، لأنه كان مرعب، كان مش مطارد، كان يطارد. إني بحب إبراهيم لأنه يعني كان قدوة لكل شباب نابلس، كان قدوة لكل أطفال نابلس.
صورة الشهيد البطل عبد الله الحصري، أرعب كيان وغشم ومدمر وأسير وجريح وشهيد. أنا حبيته عشان كان مقاوم ودافع عن وطنه.
The family of Hassan Katanani was congratulated with pride and approval that their son had the honor to kill a Jewish woman and her 2 young daughters while driving in their car to meet family members during the Passover holiday. They expressed their hope and wish that the terrorist's young children would go in the footsteps of their father and merit to become holy shaheed, just like their blessed father. The terrorist's mother expressed herself in her own way.
احنا لازم نقتلهم في بلادنا، في عيالنا، في أظافرنا، ناكلهم بسناننا ناكلهم اليهود. هم أعدائنا بالأول والآخر اليهود.
الله يكرمني وأربيهم هالأولاد يطلعوا زي ما بده ربنا إن شاء الله. يكونوا من حفظة القرآن من الصالحين البارين إن شاء الله. مجاهدين في سبيل الله كمان. كنا بالنهاية على هالدرب يعني الجهاد واجب علينا. الحمد لله على كل حال.
Memorial ceremonies for holy martyrs and festivals celebrate the release of terrorists from prison at weddings and family celebrations accompanied by shooting rifles and pistols. Hundreds of Oscar youth take part in these ceremonies, including children and young adolescents, absorbing the message of blind hatred so that they too can become the killers and shaheeds of the future. The amount of weapons in the Oscar refugee camp are huge. Oscar now boasts at least 200 wanted terrorists just waiting to commit the next acts of murder. This is how the right of return, the reason for being of UNRWA, has become a source of lethal violence that surpasses the organization's hollow slogans for peace. The time has come for donor nations to think again about blind support for UNRWA.